Welcome back. It's always hard coming back after lunch. So here we are for our afternoon sessions, and I have a few housekeeping announcements. The first is that we have 10 books left of the Quality and Safety Second Edition, if anybody's interested in getting one of those before you go home. We also will be sending you out the evaluation probably tomorrow morning. And third, because we took Dr. Jack Needleman's words of wisdom seriously, we have a lot of ways to capture data, as you might have noticed. The first piece is that we really wanted to capture how you were impacted from this implementation content. So in your bags was a pre-test and a post-test. So if you can fill that out at some time, and even if you haven't done the pre-test yet, if you can even think like, how were you prior to coming here? And then how are you after? That would even be helpful. And if you can just drop off the survey at the desk. And then secondly, I think there's a couple of surveys going to be on the tables or opportunities to do other surveys because we're getting serious about really trying to capture how our work and how the QSEN competencies are impacting us as faculty and as nurses, nurse educators in practice. Are there any other announcements anybody needs to make or have? All right, because I think some people have come up to me and asked me if I could announce these surveys. So I think it's just a general announcement that please, if you could help participate in some of that evaluation, that would be very much appreciated. And so with that, I'm going to introduce Judy Didion, and she's going to actually moderate the next session.
Greetings, everyone. I am Judy Didion. I'm the Dean of the School of Nursing at Oakland University in Rochester, Michigan, and I've been a long-time QSENita. And when you ask me why, it's because we're forced to think out of the box on how we teach students and how we improve patient care. So today, I have the pleasure of introducing an interprofessional team who's representing academic and practice partnerships. And they are currently implementing an innovative model to improve quality and safety. Dr. Gail Armstrong is an associate professor at the University of Colorado in the College of Nursing and was awarded this year with the prestigious President's Teaching Scholar designation. Gail has been a member of the QSEN community since 2006, works as a QSEN national consultant, and serves on the QSEN's Institute Advisory Board. In her research, Gail advances the science of patient safety and unit-level medication error rates. Gail is a QSEN competency implementation expert, and Dr. Armstrong's clinical work is in the Institute for Healthcare Quality, Safety, and Efficiency, in which she works collaboratively with Dr. Pierce. So Dr. Reed Pierce co-leads the Institute of Healthcare Quality, Safety, and Efficiency and is based at the University of Colorado and is currently serving as interim director of the university's hospital medicine group. Dr. Pierce is an expert in coaching and education focusing on healthcare systems design, healthcare financing, policy, and physician leadership. His work impacts approximately 50 clinical microsystem leadership teams at Colorado University, with measurable and sustained improvements in quality, safety, experience, and cost of care. So please welcome, or join me in welcoming Drs. Armstrong and Pierce as they present Catalyzing Interprofessional Improvement Work.
Thank you, Judy. Can everybody hear us okay? Good. We're going to do this interprofessionally, literally, at the podium. Gail has assigned me this side of the podium because I can see over it to the slides.
That's right.
We're very happy to be here. We want to take about 20 minutes to walk through the program and the journey, what we're trying to do, and then leave some time at the end for Q&A. So we're going to move through the slides and bounce the ball back and forth. Wanted to start by listing the objectives for the session, which are to describe the work that you all heard outlined. Really, the objectives that we want to touch on today are not these two, though, which are the objectives for the session. It's the real objective, as I call it, as we've called it, which is how can you deploy educational programs, something I know is familiar to many people in this room, that advance the knowledge of systems redesign, actually change clinical systems, are accessible to a wide range of learners, not only in terms of their development, but also in terms of the different professions or disciplines that populate our delivery systems, and become self-propagating, or if you want to think of it this way, become sustainable, make this work sustainable. If you can do that, then I'm going to argue this is part of the path to what we sometimes call clinical or systems transformation. And that is a large part of the work that we have been trying to do for the last 5 to 6 years. And that work was built in response to pressures on care delivery systems and pressures on the training programs that all of you know well in the audience. So I'm not going to belabor this slide, but we talk about it a lot in our organization. There is a relatively recent history in quality, safety, and care systems where when we talk about quality and safety and efficiency and things like service, the mental model has been around the things you see on this slide. And we are in the process of shifting to a future in which both policy and a lot of secular trends are pushing us to think about quality differently, to think about safety differently, to think about experience of care differently. And if you go down into the care delivery system, if you walk through clinics, if you walk through hospitals, and you talk to people about what that change feels like, they will talk about words like this: disruption, chaos, turbulence. As we were talking about over lunch, some people have started to ask me, does the law of gravity still apply? In other words, what assumptions are stable in the work that we've been doing in the world that we live in? And acknowledging that change in our organization about 5 or 6 years ago, we set out to try to address that disruption or that transformation, and to do so in a way that felt generative, positive, and helpful to people who are out there leading this work. As we did so, one of the key things we stumbled upon was this insight. There are lots of folks outside of the care environment who want us to change and are trying to get us to change. And we knew that we had to find a way to maximize the engagement, the participation of people living inside the care delivery system. Because we waited for someone else to do the work and to do the design, we were going to lose not only engagement, but an opportunity to create the work in a more meaningful and productive way. And so part of our journey, the institute that you heard described, has been about maximizing the engagement of insiders.
And I would just say philosophically, what we do in IHQSE is actually very similar to QSEN's philosophy of faculty development is some of the most important work we do, so that the changes and the updating that happens in educational systems happens from the inside out. And it's not, I'm just trying to meet this accreditation requirement, but it really is people determining their own future. And so there's a nice philosophical crossover there.
So we took that idea, that philosophy, and created about 6 years ago our Institute for Healthcare Quality, Safety, and Efficiency. We live in the academic setting. We name things poorly. This is an acronym that does not roll off the tongue. Nonetheless, over the last 4 to 5 years, we have taught people to say IHQSE. And to Gail's point, what we wanted to do was to focus on how do we build the capacity of our workforce. We're going to talk about that more in a moment. I want to start, though, by sharing that the way the Institute was set up was very deliberately and I think intelligently designed in light of our goals. And what I mean by that is it is a jointly funded venture by our children's hospital on our academic campus, our adult hospital, the College of Nursing, and the School of Medicine. So it brings together, from the very beginning, the delivery system and the educational system. It brings together different disciplines and professions by its very funding nature. And that's allowed us to be in both a neutral place. We're not pushing the agenda of any particular hospital or any particular educational body. And it's also created a collaboration opportunity between a lot of different players across the campus who were doing this work and didn't necessarily have a forum to do it in the way that we have been able to do it ever since.
And I would just add that that shared ownership, philosophically but also functionally, is very important. And I want to offer a little bit of structure at this point. IHQSE is kind of a overriding body that one of the first pieces it developed was a 12-month certificate training program for teams, interprofessional teams of clinicians. And that's really the part of IHQSE that Reed and I are talking about today, is this 12-month certificate training program that works with teams from the 2 hospitals that are our partners.
So let me walk through a little bit of what that looks like so you can see what we're working on. We said, as Gail articulated, we want to enable or empower the workforce in our care delivery system to lead the kinds of change that you guys have been talking about working on for more than a decade. So you can call it high value care, you can call it the triple aim, now the quadruple aim. The point is, how do we get our workforce engaged and able to do that productively, sustainably, interprofessionally? And so we set up this thing that we've called the Institute. The Institute has lots of moving pieces and multiple training programs, and the overarching vision of the Institute for Healthcare Quality, Safety, and Efficiency is to increase the capacity of the workforce to both improve existing systems and create new models of care. And if you do that iteratively over time, you get clinical transformation. And we recognized from the beginning that simply trying to do the work would not suffice if we weren't developing people along the way. And thus this idea of faculty or human leader development came into focus. That's the certificate training program. So this is a 12-month program. It's about 80 hours of classroom time. We meet every second and fourth Tuesday for 4 hours. And then there's some other stuff on top of the classroom work we're going to describe in just a moment. Very rigorous. The point, though, is that human development takes time, and we recognize that if we didn't do that, we were going to miss an opportunity, because what we heard from people, and I'll show you more details in a moment, was that we needed to help build highly effective interprofessional teams first, so that then we could go out and do the improvement work, and in some cases, try to create new models of care. And it's only if you do those last couple things that you get to transformation, but transformation can't begin just by a mandate to go change. You've got to invest in the people up front.
Yeah, that's a really important point. So to put the history of the CTP into context, we launched our first cohort of 14 teams, 16 teams?
Yes.
16 teams in 2013. The faculty, the core faculty, actually are still teaching in the CTP. We're the same core faculty. We are interprofessional, and we every once in a while look at each other and go, wow, I can't believe we are in the middle of our 5th year of this certificate training program. And I want to say that I was not part of the team that built the CTP, but one of the pieces of brilliance was effective interprofessional collaboration takes time. And that 12-month time frame has been part of what one of our colleagues, Patrick Nealon, would call our secret sauce, that it's that 12-month commitment that teams make to education and practice and learning and a lot of PDSAs.
So let me unpack a little bit what we're talking about in terms of both the recipe and the special sauce. Let's start with where our workforce began. So when we started this program, we had some ideas, and Gail will share with you some of the basic frameworks, particularly the QSEN competencies, how they informed what we were teaching. We also asked our learners. So we went out into the care environment and we said, hey, leaders of units and programs, physicians, nurses, pharmacists, et cetera, how well are you able today in your role as a leader for the last 3, 5, 7, 10 years to do things that we know are required if you're going to lead this kind of change? For example, do you have a good sense of what is driving change, and do you have strategies for how to manage that? Roughly a quarter of people said yes. So 3/4 of our people said, I don't know how to do that even though that is my job. How comfortable are you using basic tools of quality improvement, patient safety, removing waste in your operations? And you can see between 2 and 10 and 4 of 10 said, yeah, I can do that. In other words, the majority said, I cannot. A quarter said, I know how to manage change. 3/4 were not confident in their ability. Now, thankfully, 7 out of 10 said, I can build a good team, but only 4 out of 10 said, I know how to use data to do quality improvement, even though that is my job. So that's where we were starting. And there was another really important insight when we started talking to people in the first year. We recognized that the lives led by most of these clinical leaders look like this. You lived in a clinical unit or program. There was a physician and a nurse maybe who had asked to partner. And it was, how do we divide and conquer? In other words, somebody needs to ride each one of those arrows. We got a quality committee. Who's sitting on that? Oh, there's a patient safety event. Somebody's going to go sit on that thing. Oh, now we got a staffing crisis. Let's put somebody in the operations space. People weren't collaborating holistically to manage all of that stuff collectively, effectively, and efficiently, and to do so as an act of joy. In other words, people weren't having fun trying to manage that box.
There's been a lot of learning over our 4.5 years as a faculty, and this slide taps into I think is one of our most important pieces of learning, which is in healthcare, we're not really clear when we use the word team what we mean. Even in the CTP, we found, is it the CTP team, the people that are showing up for class every other week? Is it the clinical leadership team that oversees the microsystem? Is it a formal leadership team, the nurse manager and the director of the unit? Is it the frontline team? Is it another team that exists within that microsystem? And so one of the pieces we have refined in our 4.5 years with the CTP is we've gotten very specific and very targeted with our learners about what team we're talking about.
The other thing we've recognized, and this continues to come up, is that very often folks come to us because they're activated, and they're typically activated because someone told them they need to do a QI project. There's some issue in their care environment, and you need to go learn how to solve that issue because you didn't learn it in school somewhere. And that's really important because that's sort of our hook. What's equally important, speaking to what we're talking about in terms of development and engagement, is that the backbone of the entire program is really about this. How do we enhance the leadership of interprofessional teams? So we feed that into every part of the system, every part of the curriculum that we're going to show you in a second. And that has turned out to be a second key part of this special sauce.
Go on to the next slide. Yeah, so this is a really interesting slide. It's a really busy slide. You can go all the way through it, yeah. But what this gives you is in one slide our 12-month curriculum. And I'll just say very quickly, all of the QSEN competencies are core to what we teach in this certificate training program. We have the team start off with the voice of the patient activity where they interview patients about their experience of care. Teamwork and collaboration is threaded throughout. We do a tremendous amount of process improvement teaching, which teaches teams how to engage in systematic QI. The teams look at adverse outcomes as well as safety culture. They are continually looking at what data is available, what data can we track, and what data is going to help us understand our outcomes in terms of informatics. And EBP is threaded throughout the whole year of how they're doing, what they're doing as a team. And I'll just say our teams are remarkably different. We could probably talk for an hour about our different teams, but just suffice to say you can come from a genetics lab and do the CTP, or you can be the bone marrow transplant unit and do the CTP. Our teams are remarkably different.
So the last thing I want to add in terms of the special sauce comment that Gail mentioned is in the middle of this slide, that's the 80 hours. That's what we do in the classroom. But what's on the right-hand slide is, I think, even more critical than what we do in the classroom. So we talk about theory, we talk about skills in the classroom. That small group work column over on the right-hand side, that highlights the fact that we have made a commitment. In every classroom session, we try to spend a minimum of 50% of our time with skills practice. So we talk about something and we do some sort of practice in the classroom with a safe space, the other people in the room, and faculty to help support people in mastering skills. And then we try to take it out of the classroom. So the two green columns are meant to represent a series of homework assignments. We often call those micro projects where people are asked to practice not just in the classroom, but back in their workspace. And over time, over the first 6 months, those series of assignments build into a coherent quality improvement project that people work on for the final 6 months. And they do all of this, far right-hand part of the slide, with an assigned faculty coach who does mentored implementation of the skills in the quality improvement project and is on call for ad hoc stuff that comes up in leadership, because you can't plan when your turnover is going to go to 30%. And you can't plan when some sort of cultural change is going to happen. And the coaches play a major role in guiding people through that leadership journey and helping them enhance their leadership skills around a lot of the unpredictable things that happen these days in our care delivery environment, because I don't find any care delivery environment that's stable for more than a few months these days.
Next is all you.
So the model, just to summarize it, looks a little bit like this. Now what we're doing is we're looking for clinical units and programs. We ask them before they even join, hey, who is on your leadership team now? Can we get a sense of what your team function is? We then bring people at the top of that pyramid into this one-year certificate training program, and we give them what we've been talking about. 80 hours of classroom education plus intensive coaching in and out of the classroom, and then support with data and process improvement expertise to do a QI project. Really important at the bottom of that slide, this is not just about learning the skills of quality and safety, it's about learning the skills of leadership that you can take back to your interprofessional leadership team and apply broadly. Because what that gets you, if you do it right, is a focus on teamwork and leadership that supports, nurtures the culture, and then if you put into the culture the skills of quality and safety to do improvement work, it'll stick. we've found again and again, teams that want to jump that first step and go straight to the improvement work, two things happen. The projects don't work, they take off and then they stall, and worse yet, the next project is harder because resentment has gone up in the unit. So getting the team and the culture thing right is critically important as we do this work. So as we head to the last part of our slides before Q&A, I want to share 3 points of view on does this actually work. So here's point of view 1. We asked the participants. So we did that intake survey that Gail talked about. That was based on a lot of the knowledge, skills, and attitudes frameworks that were developed actually out of QSEN from the very beginning. And then we do a survey that mirrors it on the back end. And if you look at the first 3 years, we're crunching data for last year right now. What we see is marked gains in all the things that we surveyed at the beginning. So people feel much more confident in their ability to understand and respond to external business drivers. They are much better at using basic quality improvement skills, safety skills, waste removal skills. They can lead change much more effectively. Thankfully, they say we're also much better at building and running teams, and we know what to do with the data that we can get our hands on. This is good stuff, but it's self-reported. And so equally important to me is, what do the teams do? This is a very partial list, the running list that we have of what are all the projects people have done. And the point here is not to read this, it's to recognize that there are inpatient and outpatient examples, adult and pediatric examples, things that touch on multiple elements of the quadruple aim, quality and safety and population health and experience. And there have been sustained projects now across 50 plus clinical microsystems that are making a very real difference both in clinical outcomes and cost of care. Here's a very specific brief example. So in our second cohort, our inpatient geriatrics unit, what we call the acute care for the elderly service or team, came through. They realized that when patients needed to go to a skilled nursing facility from their unit, it took 3 days longer than it took for other patients who were going home or were going home with home health. And so they designed a series of key interventions, which look like this. They said, we're gonna have an earlier conversation when we think the SNF placement is on the radar, and we're gonna have a trigger in our daily multidisciplinary rounds to raise that issue and vocalize it so everybody in the care team is aware that we're thinking about that. And then we're gonna put together a standard documentation set that goes to the skilled nursing facilities so that they have a good sense of what's coming and are ready to work with us in a more efficient manner. And lastly, we're gonna institute a 4 p.m. huddle where we talk about what's coming up the next day. This helps the case manager, the social worker, prioritize his or her time, arrange early transportation, et cetera. And over now about 2 years, they've shaved roughly a day off their length of stay. It didn't affect safety outcomes, so readmission rate is the same. They've saved a lot of time in the hospital, which translates into real dollars that can then be used to reinvest in that clinical microsystem in a way that helps support and sustain this kind of work. This team was coached by Gail. So Gail, observations on how this went for them?
It was an interesting process, just very quickly. The data is impressive. The communication interventions were highly effective, but the real work in this 12-month process was really to bring the members of the team along as a unit. The question that took 6 months to answer is who owns discharges to SNFs? And it was only when we finally did a voice of the social worker interview that we really started uncovering some deep-seated issues that once we addressed really moved this team along much more quickly. So there's the interventions, but then there's the real deep work that has to happen at the team level.
So last, Gail has done an impressive amount of work asking the nurses who participated in our program, what has your experience been like and what has been the impact? And she's going to walk through a couple of slides related to that, and then we'll take questions.
Yeah, so at the end of the first year, I thought I really want to capture some discipline-specific data for nurses. How did they experience this 12-month commitment? How was their experience of the team? So this survey has been done every year. I asked nurses, before you began the CTP, what was your perception of how relevant quality and safety were to your nursing practice? Pretty good buy-in on this one. At the conclusion, though, how relevant do quality and safety feel to your nursing practice? And you can see we end up with a 90% extremely relevant. And over 4 years, I've had about 50% of the nurses who participated in the CTP complete my survey. So this is about half of all of our nurses. When asked about how the CTP enhanced their nursing practice, nurses are pretty strong that it was really a wonderful experience to broaden, expand the scope, and enhance their nursing practice. This question asks, the skills that you learned in the CTP, how likely are you to continue to use these in your nursing practice? And again, a very strong positive response to this question. I have 3 qualitative questions on the survey that asks about the experience of working on an interprofessional team. You can see the way the question is asked is, did the interdisciplinary nature of your team make your CTP team's work more difficult? If yes, explain. And you can see there's a variety of themes that emerge from this qualitative question. Just one direct quote. At times it was difficult, especially in the beginning where there was a lack of role awareness among disciplines. However, as our team got stronger, our relationships grew stronger as well, with members verbalizing the value of each discipline's presence on the team. And I want to say that through the 4.5 years that we've been doing this, I've really seen that collaborative working relationship over the whole year is one of the key parts, I think, of our secret sauce. Authority gradients. I don't think we talk enough about authority gradients, so I really wanted to ask in my survey, and I asked 2 questions about authority gradients. Did you have any experience with authority gradients on your team's communication process and on your team's decision-making process? And you can see the themes that emerged. One of the interesting direct quotes, yes, authority gradients can exist within the medical and clinical operational leadership teams. Who is in charge of this ship anyway? This program has really helped to align all of us as leaders to be thoughtful and inclusive of the various teams and has brought cohesion to communication related to quality and safety work. What a wonderful quote. And then the last qualitative question I ask is, how will your participation in the CTP impact your nursing practice? And 100% of the nurses who took my survey answered this question, and the responses are very, very robust. Just one direct quote to share with you. The CTP allows me to see my nursing practice in a very different lens and better identify opportunities to enhance, reduce, or improve current processes. So I think the model that we are continuing to develop at the University of Colorado and with Children's Hospital Colorado has been really effective, not only for the teams, but certainly for the nurses on these teams. All right.
Sounds like we have time for 1, or if extremely speedy, perhaps 2 questions.
Hi, I think I understand what it means, but can you further define authority gradient?
So it actually comes from crew resource management models where people who have formal leadership have more opportunity to speak, and that people who have less formal leadership feel like because of the formal authority differences that they're not able to contribute to team processes. Pat, did you have a question?
Yeah, I was interested to know what the structure of your institute is. How many FTEs do you have? You don't have to say how much you're funded, but I'd be interested in knowing that, because when you want to start something like this, the biggest barrier is who's going to do the work, who's going to pay for the work. So I'm interested in.
Yeah, I can comment on that briefly. So we have asked different things from different parts of the organization. So what I mean by that is we asked the College of Nursing and the School of Medicine to fund faculty members' time so that they can have protected time or bought out time to do this. And roughly speaking now, we have about 1 FTE that's allocated among a bunch of different people across different disciplines. The 2 different hospitals also kicked in some resources to hire people. So we have a program coordinator that's funded by the adult hospital where I work. We also have a little bit of support for data analysts and process improvement folks, but that was kicked in by the hospital. Those people are aligned to hospital initiatives, so they have to be sure that they are working on things that our teams are working on that also align with what the hospitals want. But that's what the resource allocation looks like in a nutshell.
Thank you.
Let's do 1 more minute. Great. All right.
Great. Thank you.